trying to keep it a secret that I was Canadian, or was. I recently joined a room full of mostly Africans pledging allegiance to the United States of America as a citizen of this great nation. So it's my father was Canadian military RAF and World War II veteran who ended up becoming an American citizen. So he loved this country. He loved both countries. So I figured if he could land at D-Day and join America, I could at least do the same thing. But it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I'm going to not talk about oil prices directly, but I'm going to talk about them indirectly. I've been around the energy business a long time, in the oil and gas business, and in fact, the company you mentioned in my bio that I took public, the anchor part of that company was in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which you don't know. So I've been to Oklahoma a fair number of times over the years. This is familiar territory. If I knew exactly when oil prices were going to go up, you know what I would be doing. I would work on Wall Street. I'd be a trader. I'd be in Houston, and people who can guess it exactly right make a lot of money. Pretty much nobody gets it exactly right. I mean, the people that appear to get it exactly right, you read about. The other 1,000 you don't read about because they lose a lot of money. So it's one of those odd tautologies in the forecasting business. You only hear from the people who were right, or you ignore the people who were wrong because they're famous and they're appealing. So their forecasts, you forget what they actually said. One of the problems with writing, I write a lot, is my forecasts are in the public record. So you can go back and see what I said 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, 6 years ago, and longer ago. So in the spring of 2014, when oil prices were north of $100 a barrel, just as a way of an introduction to what I'm going to talk about, I took a very public bet with a former ambassador to Russia. We were having a debate, a similar situation as this, but it was set up as a debate, which I generally don't. I don't enjoy doing. I've done lots of debates on energy and tech and climate change and green stuff and nuclear stuff. I don't find them productive personally because you can't explain things. You're basically gaming. It's kind of like the political debates we're having going on now, where everything is really about the gotchas. You're really trying. The dirty little secret about debates is your primary goal is to annoy the hell out of your opponent, right? Because you want to rattle them so they'll look stupid or say something stupid, and then you've won, because the dynamic of a debate is that you look like the reasonable person. And once I figured that out, I stopped arguing facts in debates. I did use facts, but I only chose facts that I knew would really tick off my opponent and rattle them. And it was very effective. And you have to insulate yourself from that, whether it's a personal attack or a factual attack, or then as long as you insulate yourself. You saw Chris Christie do that to Rubio probably if you watched the New Hampshire debates, and you saw it again. And that's how debates work. Not very useful in my opinion, although it's great theater. So I had this debate. I took a public bet. Oil was 110 and change then, the Brent, and he said oil would never go below $100 a barrel ever. We're in a world of a lot of hurt because we're running out of oil. There's a lot of people still believe we're running out of oil. Not everybody, but a lot of people still believe that in certain communities. And would never go below $100 a barrel again. And I said, well, this is great. I'll take the bet. And I said, in fact, I've known this for 140 years in the oil business. Oil has never stayed over $100 a barrel. It's done that 3 times, and it doesn't last for more than a couple of years, ever. Markets don't like oil at $100 a barrel, and anybody can produce oil at $100 a barrel. At $100 a barrel, the world just is gushing oil at the seams everywhere on the planet. It's like Katie bar the door. As I said unkindly to one of my friends, morons make money when oil's at $100 a barrel. You can't not make money at those prices, so it's like Mardi Gras. Everybody's drunk. And it's going to end. It'll end this year. So I took the bet to 80. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 80. By the end of 2014, we're below 80. It was below, as you know, I think it dropped to like high 60s, which would seem like a really nice number today, by the way. I took another bet when it was in that range, saying it would still go lower, not because I knew anything particularly magical, because I know something about the oil business that you all know. It's a cyclical business. The word cycles has a meaning. So when Mardi Gras was going on, you knew it was going to end. The inverse of that, which we have the same psychology at every cyclical market, for every cyclical product, every single time. When it's at the bottom, no one ever thinks it's going to end. It's just over, it's the end of the world. Now, for some companies, regrettably, on cycles, the bottom is an end of the world, right? Because that's just the nature, either over-leveraged on debt or poorly managed. There's a lot of reasons companies, or maybe they're a damn fine company, but they just couldn't survive the bottom cycle. That's not easy. But we know prices will go back up. The question is always when. It's like, are we in a 1986 cycle where we're a decade plus bouncing on bottom before it goes back up? Or are we in a more typical cycle of the last 100 years where it's a year and change, year or two. We're into the year one of what I think is roughly a 2-year cycle. So let me tell you why this cycle is shorter and why the business that you're in is not an evanescent business, a bubble business. Let me talk about the fundamentals of the oil markets. It's maybe stuff you all know, but it's the only way that when I'm an advisor, I used to, and I still episodically advise traders, because what they really want to know is if they have, we'll call it long money, if they're thinking about the world 2 years out, 3 years out. Very few traders think out a decade. Policymakers are supposed to think out a decade. But traders don't. Businesses don't really think out a decade. They do in theory, but as a practical matter, you really think you're thinking out not just your quarter, but what's going to happen in the next few years. So let me tell you what's going to happen in the next few years with oil. And let's start out by just very big picture stuff. Paint you a picture of where the world is with respect to oil and where it's going, why it's going there. Because I think when you hear what I'm going to say, you'd be pretty bullish about the business you're in, and it would perhaps give you some reason to work hard to survive at the bottom, on the bottom of the cycle. First of all, the oil world is sort of demarked in the modern era by the event of 1973. Of course, it's more than 40 years ago. Some of you weren't born then. Some of you may have been doing other things and weren't paying attention in 73. But that's when the Saudi Arabia embargoed the United States, and that was the great oil embargo, which increased prices, just to give you a calibration point, by 300% overnight. So just give you a sense of, imagine if oil prices went up 300% in the next week. Well, yeah. The problem is those kinds of oscillations create incredible distortions in politics. So we generated 4 decades of belief that oil got expensive because it was going away. So we had 40 years of U.S. policy focused on 3 things because of that oil embargo and the subsequent 79 crisis, which took it up another 100% in a week. So everything about U.S. energy policy has been focused on just 3 things, if you think about it. And it started with the Energy Policy Conservation Act of 1975, which President Ford signed into law. And what all policy in America, and this has been true of both political parties, has been to protect American oil, can't export it, protect it because it's running out. I mean, the lesson they derived from the Saudi Arabia cutting us off is oil's running out. This is how politicians think, right? Not that the Saudi Arabians didn't want to sell us oil, but we're running out of oil. So we protect American oil by building strategic petroleum reserve and banning American firms from selling to willing buyers overseas. You try to make everything more efficient, use less oil, CAFE standards, efficiency metrics, all kinds, and find replacements for oil. Notice none of it was about, with a few exceptions, producing more oil. It was all about avoiding oil, anticipating oil disappearing. So that's energy policy for that 40 years. What happened in those 40 years? Well, since 1973 to today, the world's economy has grown incredibly. Right? You all know this. But what's interesting about this is that the share of the world's GDP that's in trade, the world's more interconnected language, the world is a lot more interconnected. The share of the world's GDP that's in trade, the share of the world's economy in trade, was 30% in 1973. It's 60% today. All trade of goods and people, because that's what you trade. People move around. You guys drive around. I fly around. I drive. All trade involves the movement of goods and people, by definition. All trade, therefore, uses transportation. 95% of all transportation is oil-fired in the world today. It was then, it is today. That hasn't changed. It's changed by a fraction of a percent globally. So we have a bigger world economy that's twice as interconnected, and all the interconnectivity is anchored in machines that burn oil. Over that time period, the share of the world's oil that's used to make transportation fuels. So in 1973, only 30% of the world's oil was used to make transportation fuels, to make gasoline and diesel fuel and aviation fuel. 30%. The rest was for power generation and petrochemicals. Today, 60% of the world's oil is used to make transportation fuels. So think of that transformation. Over that time period, the oil markets have become more important in relative terms and more important in absolute terms. Over that time period, the use of cars, that is, and the use of ships, road miles and marine tonnage carried, has gone up 300%. Aviation miles have gone up 700%. So that's the world we live in today. Right? This is a world that is more oil dependent, not less oil dependent, in every metric that's possible to measure. The future, so if you want to know where does oil demand go, because obviously the question now is, price is determined by a very simple metric that's very difficult to actually guess day to day. Supply and demand, obviously. So the first thing you want to figure out is where's demand going to go? And where's supply going to come from? Those are the two. Well, so let's do the thought experiment before I go deeper into supply. If it were the case that oil supply was going to come in the future from other places other than the United States, when oil was $100 per barrel,